Welcome back to Tuesday morning's Off the Ball Breakfast. We have some breaking news there, Nathan.
Yeah, it has been confirmed that Shamrock Rovers have been moved into the second qualifying round after Drogheda United were kicked out of Europe. So Rovers were due to start in the first qualifying round. They'll now start in the second qualifying round.
The last 24 hours couldn't have gone more differently for Drogheda United and Shamrock Rovers. Keith, welcome.
Hello, lads. Good morning.
We were talking about the issue of motivation at the start of the show when it comes to Rory McIlroy and what he's going to do now with his career after winning the Masters, and how do you get back up for it?
I'm probably the last man in the world to ask. As soon as I played in the Premier League and for Ireland, the fire went out in my belly.
Really?
So, yeah, it did. I've spoke about this a million times before. As soon as I ticked that list and played for Ireland, played in the Premier League, I just went downhill. I felt like I reached my Everest, and I couldn't generate any sort of fire or want. And don't get me wrong, I was in the midst of drinking an awful lot at the time as well, so it was always going to be an uphill battle. But as soon as I played in the Premier League and for Ireland, the fire did just start to be quenched.
That's interesting. There's a great it's a 30 for 30 documentary of this quarterback called Todd Marinovich, and he was like the ultimate professional as a young fella,
right?
And then finally made it to the NFL and played, and then he was like, I've no more motivation, and then went on the sauce for a few
even
years.
Tyson Fury said it as well. Once he beat Klitschko, he said, like, all I wanted to do was beat Klitschko, and once I'd done it, it was don't know what to do with myself now.
Jeez.
It was exactly the same scenario for Stephen Bradley when we recorded that Inner Drive episode. That he said the day he turned 17 and the professional contract with Arsenal was signed and he looked in his bank account was the day he stopped working as hard.
Yeah.
And the problem is, as you were aware, the second you stop working as hard in the Premier League, there's a long line of guys ready to run past you very quickly.
Yeah, you get found out very, very quickly. Mine wasn't particularly, financially based. It was just starting to play in the Premier League, playing in the Championship, got a couple of caps for Ireland, and I just thought, I've made it. And
how does that sort of manifest itself then when you're going into training every day? If we were to talk to people who were around you back then, like what's the change?
See, at Blackburn there was a. If you were a young kid, whether you were playing or not, you were supposed to bring the balls in off the coach, help the kit man with stuff. And I always seen it as a rite of passage that if I played, I didn't have to do them things. And I was always really eager not to be carrying the balls off the bus. I wanted to feel like a proper member of the force team. And as soon as I started to play, I thought, okay, I'm in that bracket. And then I got injured for a while, and I spent a lot of time with force team players, the likes of Dominic Matteo, Gary Flicktoft, Robbie Fowler. There were so many players in there, and I latched onto those older players, and I thought, well, I'm one of these, because they treated me like one of them. And I never was smart enough to step back and think, well, Keith, these are at the end of their career, you're at the start of your career, you need to cop on here. And I latched onto, I wouldn't say bad pros, but pros that were coming towards the end of their career, and I just couldn't get a hold of myself.
Would you have known by watching you play, if you had known you as a person and a player up to that point, that you had lost a bit of motivation? Would you have seen a difference in your performances?
I think so, yeah. It was a little bit of everything, though, because once you get into the Premier League, like I was a ball-carrying winger that liked to run at people every time I got it. Once you get into the Premier League, it's sort of pick and choose your moment. So my biggest weapon of running past people was taken away from me. I was only told to do it on certain occasions.
Right.
But I would imagine that if you knew me well enough, you'd have probably thought, there's something up with Keith. And a lot of managers did try and speak to me, Keith Andrews, I know we'll probably get on to Keith later with the being linked to Brentford. Keith put his arm around me once or twice. Eddie Howe put it around me. Just so many managers did, but at the time I didn't see a problem because there was other players in the dressing room doing what I was doing. But again, they were coming towards the end and I was only kicking off.
They always say about Paul Gascoigne, if Alex Ferguson had convinced him to sign for Manchester United rather than Spurs, that he would have sorted them out, but Gaz said no, like he had his own problems. And is it the same idea with yourself, that there was no one? I know, like, you obviously speak very fondly of Sean Dyche, and we've had you on together on the show and all that. So was there actually was a person that was potentially able to fix you at that time when you were losing motivation, or was this something that goes way beyond football? Yeah,
I think it went way beyond football. I don't think anybody could have really helped me. Like Eddie Howe tried to get me to go down to Tony Adams' Sporting Chance down south. But again, I turned that down. Sean Dyche asked me to move Imran for a couple of months to get myself sorted, but again, I turned that down. And there was people that did genuinely try to help me, but like I said, I think you have to be wanting help. I don't think you can be forced into help.
Would you be able to help a young version of yourself now?
Probably not. Because me, as an individual, I wasn't ready for help. I didn't see a problem. As I say, I was looking at other people within the dressing room and they were doing it and they had millions in the bank, and I wasn't smart enough to see that times were moving on and the modern footballer was different to the older footballer. So, I don't think there was anybody in the world that could have sent me down and sorted me out, to be honest with you, other than years later, I sat with a therapist, and I think 4 years of therapy later, I managed to unload an awful lot of stuff and freed myself of an awful lot of burdens. But I don't think that could have happened in the footballing environment, because the psychiatrist, the therapist, whoever it is you go and speak to, they report back to the club, and the club get to know the inner workings of your mind. And that was something that was always viewed as a weakness for me. And when you're in competition with left wingers, if the manager has it, well, who will I start today? Will I start Keith, or will I start Ross Wallace? Well, Keith's in with his therapist twice this week, so maybe something's not right. So it's just not the right environment to do it within a footballing setting. But I think it should be something that footballers do on their own accord.
Yeah, it's very interesting, because I would have thought it wouldn't have been the right time to do it, because if you're unburdening so much over 4 years, that it would take so much energy away from you.
Yeah.
And you'd have to show vulnerability, which, as you say, vulnerability in a dressing room.
Yeah, it's not.
And we've all played at different levels. Like, it's,
and to be fair,
goes hand in hand.
I had to go and see a psychiatrist under Sam Allardyce. We were in Austria, and he said, look, they brought a psychiatrist for some of the older lads to unload on, but the older lads, just like I am saying now, we're looking at the psychiatrist thinking, I'm not opening up to him because he's Sam Allardyce's mate. So it got kicked down the line to the youngest player in the squad, and I opened up, and before I knew it, I was on loan to Sheffield United.
Jesus.
Clubs are, and even in this country, and going back to Stephen Bradley and what they're doing out in Shamrock Rovers, where their therapist Mary Larkin is doing a huge amount of work with particularly the younger players, and obviously somebody like Michael Noonan, who's had personal issues to go through over the last few months, that they were very, I think, in advance of that, and working with him for ever since he arrived at the club to prepare him for this and prepare him for everything that comes with it. So at least now clubs are proactive, and players at a very young age are used to speaking with therapists, are used to opening up about what's going on away from football. Yeah, I do think the landscape has changed a little bit within football. You can be a little bit more open, but like the likes of Michael Noonan, I was lucky enough to work with him with Pat's under 17s. We went to Le Havre, and Mick is a wonderful young kid, very, very humble, a wonderful player. But you do look at him at times, and just like going down when he's sitting, and you're looking at him eating spaghetti bolognese, and you're thinking he's just a child. Yeah. And I look at him and think, my God, and I go back to my career, and I'm thinking that if I'm looking at him as a child, what was I like at 15 going away? And I just think that the landscape, thankfully, has changed an awful lot. And whether it's a good or a bad thing for Irish football, I'm sure we'll find out in the end. But it's a good thing for the person. Like, there is,
good thing for the person.
There's obviously a massive debate as to the benefit of having to stay here now between 16 and 18. And you could argue that Michael Noonan and Mason Mealy and Victor Osimhen are the outliers, and that they're playing first team football. So there is a benefit to them staying. Most guys are still in an academy and not getting what they would get in England. But actually, 99% of players aren't going to make it anyways.
Yeah.
But the guys now are going to be so much more well-rounded by having, like, how much more beneficial is it for Michael Noonan at 16 to still be in school, still when he's having a tough day, he's going home to his ma, he's living at home, he's doing all, same with Mason Mealy, rather than, as you experienced, as Stephen Bradley experienced, going over when you're 14, 15, totally isolated, nobody to turn to.
Yeah. No, I think it's absolutely massive for the lads, and I always had a very good comparison. My uncle David Cassidy went over to Derby at the age of 18, so David hung on to do his leaving cert and then went over to Derby, whereas I went to Blackburn at 15. So I was always looking at David and thinking, well, which is better? And David didn't make it into the first team at Derby. He got to the reserves and he came back and had a decent League of Ireland career, but a much well-rounded, much better well-rounded human being than I was. I was all in with the football. But it's so difficult for young lads these days. And look, I think what you're saying, Nathan, is right. It's much better for the human being to stay those extra couple of years. But on the flip side of that, if I'm playing devil's advocate, when's the last time we produced a technically gifted footballer? We're going back to young kids going to England, aren't we? I think we're a long way off producing a technically gifted footballer from this country, because we don't have the academy space. We don't have the contact hours.
Wes Hoolahan is in a proper technician. But didn't
Wes go early and then come back to Shells and then go again?
Who's the most technically gifted player in the league right now?
Probably Graham Burke, Jack Bourne.
Chris Forrester.
He's injured the last couple of weeks.
Dawson Devoy.
Cathal O'Sullivan's been spoken about in sort of Wes type ways.
Yeah. No, it's interesting for sure. Would you ever offer your services to the FAI to help out kids?
I have done. I've done out. Stephen McGuinness brought me out. There's this weird sort of grey area where lads are being offered contracts and there's agents coming, and mas and dads just don't know what to do. My mother and father are in the same boat. When these things are flooding in, it's new to the mother and father. They don't know what the norm is. So the FAI got in touch and said, look, will you give a chat to a handful of mas and dads and at this coaching course type of thing. So I did it, and I think there was 150 parents turned up, like, because they just did not know, and asking me, Keith, does my son, does my daughter need an agent at this age, at that age? And I was thinking, no. But the majority of kids at that age do have agents. It used to be a rite of passage. You got to a certain point, the agents would come knocking, and you'd think, oh, well, I'm doing something right. But at the age of 15, they're snapping everybody up.
I don't even know what the title of what I'm suggesting would be. It's not like a player liaison officer, but it's more like someone to listen to the problems that they have individually that they're never going to share in a group setting, especially when it comes to football.
I think the biggest thing is when I speak to a therapist, and even my therapist Evelyn was absolutely brilliant, but when I spoke about money and girls and football and the whirlwind that is Premier League football, I could see in her eyes that she didn't really understand. But that was a plus for me, that she couldn't get herself into it. She didn't know who I was. It was just brilliant, out of the box advice to sort myself out. But it's so difficult once you're in that environment. But the mental side of the game is absolutely massive.
I say there's a lot of our listeners tuning in this morning thinking like they would never open up in that setting. How long did it take you to open up?
Within the football setting?
No, in the therapy sessions.
Oh, it was a long time.
Yeah.
I honestly, I went and I actually done a hypnotist. My wife sent me down to Cork to be hypnotised. Yeah, this one. Yeah, I went down. I didn't really buy into all that. You sort of have to feel around and see what feels right for you. And all of a sudden, I met Evelyn, and I didn't really give her everything at once. It was little bits of the truth, little bits of a lie, little bits of diluted stuff. Because I didn't want anybody knowing how much of a poor human being I was back in the day. But eventually I got to a point where Leanne, my wife, had to come in with me, and it was how do I say this? It was basically, I laid everything on the line. I told my wife everything. I told the truth, and we started from there. But once I walked out of that room, I was like a different human being. It was all the grey area that was killing me wife mentally. It was yes, no, I didn't, I did, and everybody, me, my wife, the family, everybody was better because of it.
It was an unplanned start to this conversation.
I know, it got pretty heavy, didn't
we
it?
have Michael here on YouTube, good man. Keith, great to hear such honesty. Greg Caffrey, Keith, you're an inspiration. Even Raj said so. What I was going to ask you initially was Drogheda's motivation now.
Yeah, it's difficult. As a player, you put yourself, even I'm listening to Kevin Doherty's interview beforehand, you can hear the emotion in his voice.
That was with Nathan last night,
It's unbelievable. And when he said the words, I might never manage in Europe, you're thinking, my God, like
you can hear the voice.
You have earned the right to be in Europe. And look, I know you've outlined there's difference between Palace and this case, but it does seem like not hopefully, but the smaller club is being picked on here. And what is the main difference between the Palace one and the Drogheda one?
That Drogheda missed the deadline. So the 1st of March, Drogheda had to indicate to UEFA what they were going to do around the ownership structure. So they had to, there's lots of different technical things you can do, I think, with regards to shareholdings and a blind trust, which I assume means you move the shareholdings.
That's what Forest did, wasn't it? The blind trust.
Yeah, what Forest did. So Forest had indicated that in advance of the 1st of March that this is what they were going to do. I don't think it actually went through until April, but Drogheda weren't aware of the deadline, I think was their main case, that this was just moved this year. It used to be the 3rd of June, which you would think would make more sense considering most leagues finish in May. But actually it had been brought forward to March. And that obviously had another knock-on consequence in a way, in that I know in England, pretty much every club said it's still in the last 16 of the FA Cup in March would have applied for a licence for Europe just in case they got in. Because the other bit that we didn't speak about is that they could have been replaced by another team from the League of Ireland, but no other club had applied for a European licence. Now, apparently it's an incredibly onerous process, a huge amount of paperwork, and maybe ironically a positive reflection on the league that other clubs aren't looking around going, well, someone's going to go out of business or something's going to go wrong. And it didn't even need to be, say, Derry, the beaten cup finalists, or next in line in the league. It could have been anybody. It could have gone in and applied for a licence, and nobody did, which means that we end up losing the place. And yeah, I think, look, understandably, there's a bit of the little guy losing out, and Drogheda wouldn't have the resources of a Crystal Palace in terms of legal cases and things like that. But unfortunately, it does come down to they did miss the deadline.
Yeah, I was speaking to Dan MacDonald, actually. Was it Sunday I was in here, and he said, I think the best way he put it was, morally, Drogheda have a case, but technically, they're wrong.
Yeah, and there's no room for that in football.
There's no room for that in football.
Is it Bowes or nobody to challenge Shamrock Rovers, or is it done anyway?
I think it's nobody, to be honest with you. I don't want to sit here and say the league is over and give it to Shamrock Rovers now, but over the last 2 games, the 6 points that Shamrock Rovers have turned up, they went and beat Shelbourne, go and beat St. Pat's, and Drogheda. I think it's done. I know Bowes are in a great vein of form, winning games all over the place, but they've also lost 8 games of football this season, and they've nearly lost to everybody in the league, which goes to show you Bowes either turn up and they're brilliant and they win the game of football, or they're poor and they lose the game of football. And Shamrock Rovers have already shown this season that they can turn up and be bang average and still win a game, and that's the real sign of champions. Whereas I look at Bowes and I think, yeah, brilliant, they're going to win games, they're very good to watch, but they can also be hurt an awful lot, and I can see Bowes losing another probably 8 games between now and the end of the season, and that's not going to stay on the back of Shamrock Rovers.
Next Monday night, Bowes against Rovers in Dalymount Park. Between that game, Shamrock Rovers are playing Cork on Friday night at home, which you would expect them to win. If they win at Dalymount, that is unquestionably it done. And Shamrock Rovers then switch their attention to Europe, and that'll be their focus, and that's where they'll be putting out their strongest team. But it's not a surprise while Bowes have bounced back after the disappointing start, and it looks like on paper the league is getting stronger. The depth that Shamrock Rovers have is unprecedented, you'd have to say, in League of Ireland. Their bench last night, so Leon Poles, who I think a lot of people would feel was probably a little bit hard done by considering how well he played in Europe, is the backup keeper. Dan Cleary, Aaron McAneff, Danny Mandreu, Danny Grant, Jack Byrne, Michael Noonan, John O'Sullivan and Max Kovalevskis. Sitting in the stand, you had the likes of Gary O'Neill, Adam Matthews,
ridiculous.
Sean Kavanagh was there. This is a depth of talent that has never been seen before in the league, and it means, as happened last night, they bring on Danny Mandreu at the break, they bring on Jack Byrne for the winning goal. Jack Byrne slides this lovely ball through to Danny Mandreu, who's sort of the forgotten man, it feels like, at Rovers, produces this world-class pass to cut through the Drogheda defence, and Aaron Green at 35 still has that instinct. So to be able to bring on that type of player that can change a game completely, nobody else has that. I
know it's probably difficult for you. You were at Drogheda last night, weren't you? Was he offside, Aaron Green? Because I've looked at I was obviously in Inchicore. I've looked at the highlights, and it's impossible to tell from the highlights.
From my angle, I thought at first maybe he was, but nobody appealed it.
Yeah.
Now that didn't go far in Drogheda.
I know the handball is hugely contentious, so the offside is another kick in the teeth.
The handball at the time, I still think whether he didn't intend to handle it. His hand is in a natural position. It would be the most insane piece of defending ever if, as the ball is running past you, you just give a little flick of your hand to knock it back to the keeper on the edge of your penalty area. There's no defender in the world is doing something stupid as that.
Brian Burke is the closest person to it, and he doesn't even appeal.
So I thought it was a shocker of a decision. And listen, I see comments that Rovers were all over them after the goal. That was always the way it was going to be. Once Drogheda get their goal, that's where their game plan comes into action. Yeah, they're going to be on the back foot, but they know how to defend. They know how to hold a team out. So I think that's where the frustration for Kevin Doherty is. Actually, when they get a lead, they're so hard to break down.
Yeah. Next Monday night's the one, really, isn't it? Bowes Rovers, that's it. Keith, Irish coaches are so hot right now, especially from your vintage. So we know Conor Howrahan's in as Barnsley boss already. Darren O'Day is the assistant at Swansea. Brian Barry Murphy confirmed as the new Cardiff City manager on a 3-year contract, actually. Yeah. But they're down in League One for the first time since 2003. And as we sit here this morning, we have Keith Andrews linked with the Brentford job, but don't know what's going to happen there yet.
What are you doing with yourself? Every one of these
literally the question.
Don't start that. My wife is all over me for this. I told you.
Don't go, please.
I went up the north to do me B badge. I was supposed to go back in May to do me A badge, and honestly, it was like pulling teeth. I absolutely hated it. It was
just wasn't for you, or just the process
anyway?
Classroom
environment, get up, and there was some things I learned in terms of layering in your session, how to start it, how to finish it, the structure of things and all that. But just being in a classroom from 9 till I think it was 8 o'clock Monday to Friday, it just killed me. It's not my thing. I think if I was out on the pitch from 9 till 5, I think I could deal with it a bit more. But being in a classroom environment, a classroom setting is just not for me. It goes in one ear and out the other. My attention span is not right. Plus, I can't use laptops when you have to put all these slides together and set pieces, and I can't do all that. But I just do what Sam Allardyce does, and I'd employ somebody to do that. I'd manage, and I'd have a tech whiz beside me.
So if you're in a different era, you might have gone into management.
Maybe, yeah. I think modern day players have got a little bit softer. The messages I would probably be getting across would be a little bit heavy handed, and yeah, I'm not so sure.
I've always been so intrigued and confused by that take from yourself, that you think that like players are a bit softer now and that you be harder than them, because you yourself would be, I'd say, prime category for that type of player, the way you played the game, because you were a footballer, you were like a purist. And you weren't necessarily hard tackling, or you weren't a dirty player at all. No,
I wasn't a dirty player, but I was a very talented player, a really talented winger. But I soon found out that if you're not a elite level, and that means top 5 in the world, then you've got to work as hard as everybody else. And I was in a Sam Allardyce team that just managed to stay in the Premier League, so that was relative success. I was part of a Sean Dyche team that got promoted from the Championship that weren't as good as everybody else. That's again relative success. Everywhere I've gone, it hasn't been a tactical masterclass. It's been hard work. That's been the underlier everywhere. So I think tactics are always going to be secondary, and what you should be putting into kids and even older pros now is work harder than the person you're up against, and 9 times out of 10 you'll win the game of football. I
don't know how well you know Keith Andrews, but what kind of an appointment would this be if Brentford did make that decision?
It'd be a very intriguing one. Obviously, he's
a massive risk.
It's a huge jump, like for somebody to go straight in as the Brentford head coach, and he hasn't managed anywhere. I know he's got some coaching work in the background with Ireland, with Sheffield United under Chris Wilder. He's only 44 years of age, Keith, and I roomed with Keith for a while with the Ireland B team, and we were obviously Blackburn mates together as well. And I had a lot of time for Keith. Keith is, I would describe him as old school. He loved to tackle, and once you go across the white lines, I think he was playing for Ipswich and I was playing for Burnley, and he left a bit on me as well, and we would have been close, or as close as you can be to Keith at a time when you're playing against him. But yeah, it was something. It's an appointment, or if it does happen, it's something that would really intrigue me. Young Ireland manager, somebody like, you look at the people he's took from and learned from: Stephen Kenny, Chris Wilder. I know people think Sheffield United long ball. It's a very different Sheffield United team that Chris Wilder has, possession based. So yeah, I think it's a very intriguing one. I hope Keith does really, really well, because, as you say, the Irish coaches are really starting to stack up now.
Yeah. It'd be a massive, massive shock still.
Brentford are the only type of club that you think they are.
But Thomas Frank had been at Bromby for a few years. He had experience.
Really, he was the assistant at Brentford for 2 years.
Yeah, he was. So
that's what they tend to do.
Keith has been set piece coach for a year, and clearly, if he's gone in and made that sort of an impression in the space of 12 months, it's a huge endorsement of the way he conducts himself. And as you say, he's like a lot of these guys that we're talking about, there's a humbleness to, he's had a really good playing career, but it's been more than happy to go and work under people. And, at the sort of revolving door that was Stephen Kenny's managerial team, he, I think to his credit, stuck with him the whole way through when it was tough. It might have been easier when, Damien Duff left to go, well, actually, now's the time for me to go, or one of the other assistants, but he stuck with it. And he got a lot of credit at the start of the season, remember, for Brentford's bright starts to games from their kickoffs. There was a period with their corner kicks were exceptional as well. And my initial reaction when he didn't go with Thomas Frank to Tottenham was one of disappointment. That actually this was, because I met Keith over at a couple of games last year, and it was like, Thomas Frank's been linked with the Manchester United job. Like, you're in with the right guy here as to where it's going. So if it was to go from that and him staying because he's getting the managerial job, and like, it's incredibly exciting that so many of sort of your contemporaries, guys you played with, are going straight in at such a high level. Like Conor Hourhan did commentary with us just before Christmas, and is now the manager of Barnsley. Brian Barry Murphy, I know, had this chance at Cardiff. I think Brian is well aware of what he's letting himself in for at Cardiff, because he was strongly linked with the job this time last year. You're obviously having to deal with a interesting owner at Cardiff who might like a lot of influence. But they're all different types of personalities. Yeah. You're talking about your way of looking at the game. I think Brian Barry Murphy and some of these other young coaches probably look at it in a slightly different way. Yeah, but I look at you look at Damien Duff, for instance, the love that just seeps out of him when he's running up and down the line at Shelbourne, the intensity of him. I don't think I have that. Really? I don't get me wrong. There's a game of football. Well, the Club World Cup, I'm not too interested in that. But generally, there's a game of football on. I'm on it. I'm watching it. I'm bet into it.
But the love that you have to have as in terms of a coach to look after all the lads, to worry about all their problems, it's just not for me.
We're nearly out of time here, so I want to skip to this. We'll play episode 2 of Transfer Destination.
You're bringing out all the big guns.
This went down unbelievably well last week. So I explained the game very simple. I name a player and you tell me in your opinion where the player should go this summer.
Okay.
Transfers. Now they can stay as well. An option for you is to stay. So first player for both of you, Andy Robertson. What should he do this summer?
Go to Atletico.
Go to Atletico. Why not?
Kyle Walker. So he's linked with Everton and he was linked with Fenerbahce, I believe.
Oh, I was going to say Galatasaray.
Yeah, smacks of a Turkish or a Saudi Arabian move, doesn't it?
What's happened with Kyle Walker? He was the Manchester City captain the first half of last season. Then he ends up at AC Milan and plays pretty much every game he's available for. And now he's been linked with, a fairly resurgent Everton under David Moyes, but it's still a big fall down, is on paper anyway, from Man City to Milan to Everton.
Of Pep Guardiola. Like Guardiola, I think, spoke about this. Like, he clearly spotted something in Kyle Walker that wasn't at the levels of previous seasons, and he was, I would say, because he was such a big influence in the squad, needed to get rid of quickly. Yeah,
well, Kyle is not a great footballer. Like, I know Pep has said that on record. His recovery speed is what he's all about, and he seems to have, I wouldn't say lost a yard, but he's come down just ever so slightly. And once Kyle starts to lose that pace, he struggles.
We have time for 2 more only. Darwin Núñez.
I think he should leave. What was he 85 million to Liverpool? It's tough, isn't it? And I don't think he's ever going to be the out and out striker, and he needs to play football at the age he's at. He needs to be playing week in, week out. So for his personal growth, get out of there.
Yeah, he was getting the sort of pity clap from the Kop by the end of the season.
Premier League or beyond?
I think Liverpool are going to sell to whoever the highest bidder is because they're looking to reinvest.
Okay. Finally, Alejandro Garnacho.
I think he's got to go. With the Mbeumo deal, looks like it might happen. Cunha as well. Amad Diallo is as well knocking around.
Where should he go?
I'm not too sure. I'd like to see him stay in the Premier League.
He wants to stay. Reportedly wants to stay in the Premier League.
He's got all the talent in the world, hasn't he? I think if you get him working as hard as the likes of Kvaratskhelia at PSG, there's a real player in there. But
Villa, Newcastle, Spurs, that kind of club?
I could see him at Newcastle. I'd like him at Newcastle, but again, it's not so much the club he's going to be at. It's his work rate off the ball. Again, very good player.
Just stay at Manchester United then. Everything you said is he's not the problem.
Any player you name on United, I would say go. Just go.
But for his sake, you would say go. Manchester United should be trying to keep him, and bide your time. Give it 6 months. There might be a new manager. Or you tell the manager, here's an unbelievable talent. Your job is to get the best out of him.
Okay, so you're saying stay. Okay, perfect. Keith Treacy, thanks a million.
No problem.
OTB Breakfast at UPMC Orthopaedic Care. When things don't move, rotate, or bend like they used to, choose us to help you get back in action.